People don't buy impact. They buy shoes. The impact is what differentiates you from other footwear companies, and it also makes the consumer feel good about the purchase. But you can't wear impact. So we flipped the model of the company so that we are in business to improve lives. That's our mission. And our business model is footwear.
How do you reinvent a brand that has impacted 100 million lives for good? Hello and welcome to Retention Masterclass. Yes, we know this was CleverTap Engage, but we're shaking it up a little bit. My name is John Koetsier.
And my name is Peggy and Salz. And we're not just shaking it up. We're going to talk about a really interesting topic, John, because we're talking about mission and margin. How do you combine the both? How do you build a business, a brand, and fulfill global purpose all at the same time? And we have someone who's done it.
We do. Today, we're specifically chatting about reinventing a global brand that has super deep purpose at its core. And also, how do you do that while running a business, acquiring, retaining customers at different levels, and use the technology of marketing in sometimes surprising ways? So who are we chatting with, Peggy?
Well, John, today we're chatting with Ian Stewart. He's CMO and CDO at TOMS, so the iconic shoe company that commits 1/3 of its profits to good causes. And he's also led marketing teams at some pretty amazing companies that also are iconic in their own way, right? MTV, Coke, Converse, and leading the transformation at TOMS that we're discussing today. So great to have you. Welcome, Ian, to the show.
Thank you, Peggy. Thank you, John. Welcome to my spare bedroom in Santa Barbara, California. It's awesome to be here.
We have talked to many CEOs and CMOs who are in spare bedrooms in various places around the world over the last 2 years. That's no different. And you know what? Santa Barbara is kind of a nice place to have a spare bedroom. So, hey, not so bad. Not so bad. Yeah. Ian, let's start here. Peggy mentioned it. You've worked for lead marketing and branding at iconic companies. TOMS is also an iconic brand. You've gone through a pretty significant odyssey as a company over the last few years. Talk us through some of that journey.
Yeah, for sure. Look, as you said, I've been fortunate enough in my 30-year marketing career to pretty much only work for iconic brands, from Coke to MTV to Converse to the reinvention and turnaround of the UGG brand, and now at TOMS. So I think one of the things I've come into this job a year and a half ago was appreciating what makes a brand an icon. What makes a brand famous and well known and the thing that people buy. And TOMS is an iconic brand. It's famous for its slip-on alpargata shoe, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, over the course of this conversation, how we've modernized that and also respected it. But it's also at its core known for being a purpose-led brand, a brand that pretty much invented the giving model, the 1-for-1, buy one, we give a pair of shoes. But we came into the business a year and a half ago, and that model had kind of run its course. It's over 15, 16 years it had been emulated by everybody. It wasn't special or different, but also in the background, we felt there were better ways to be purposeful moving into the next 15, 20, 30 years of the company. So we spent a lot of time last year as a new leadership team really thinking about what we would do if we were a startup today, being purpose-led. What would our giving model be? What social issues would we get behind? What communities would we serve? And we were prepared to take 1-for-1 off the table, which was not an easy decision. A lot of people in the company and a lot of our external partners told us that that's what we're famous for. So why wouldn't you keep doing it? And we said, that's what we were famous for, but what are we going to be famous for? And we started with a clean piece of paper and we ended up with 1/3 of profits. So very transparent. The more we sell, the more we give. Very transparent, a contemporary way of talking about giving, transparent with our profits. And then we shifted our model towards giving to local communities at a grassroots level in the US, and particularly in Los Angeles, where we're based. If you can't serve your own neighborhood and communities first, who can you serve? Particularly in areas that we felt were important to the younger generation, which we'll get into. But yeah, it was a huge amount of work, a big decision, and not a decision that many companies take, to take something off the table that they're famous for. And reinvent, which comes back to understanding what makes you iconic.
And which companies start with clean sheet of paper and start by saying, hey, if we were a startup today, what would we do? That is so unusual.
Yeah. That was one of the things. Were we or are we famous for 1-for-1? Yes. Or are we famous for being a giving, purpose-led company? Even more, yes. Like, that's what we're famous for. So that gave us the license to say, let's keep being purpose-led and lead with impact and giving, but let's change the model to make it more relevant for today.
That's exciting. Changing the model. Exactly that. Because I was going to ask the question again, just to dig a little deeper in that why, because you said, oh, we found out that it had run its course. And I wanted to understand a little bit more about that, but also that changing that model. Can you elaborate just a bit more, Ian?
Yeah. Tom's has been known as a pioneer in the giving and purpose space, which we wanted to continue being famous for innovating. And we innovated 15, 16 years ago by coming up with that model with our founder, Blake, to buy a pair of shoes and give one. As I mentioned, now that buy one, give one model is everywhere, across footwear, across fashion, across all sorts of categories. So we weren't really living with something that differentiated us. And it didn't give us a lot of flexibility unless we wanted to start, buy one, give 10 or buy one, give 30, moving to a transparent profit model and coming out with a model that's quite a large give. In the world of profit giving, as I said, it's transparent. And it's also really leans into the reality that we are a company that wants to sell products. That's where we landed.
That's a really good segue, actually, because you are purpose driven. Your website literally says we're in the business to improve lives, but you still have to run that business. You still have to grow that business. How does that purpose, how do you take that and use it to drive you and your business forward?
Yeah, gosh, that being a new leadership team, many of us coming from footwear, one of our first observations coming into Tom's was that the giving was fundamental to the company and the culture and what we're famous for. But we had to be in the business of making money, and the business was footwear and shoes. And we felt that the company hadn't put enough attention on modernizing our famous silhouette, the alpargata, really making it as fashion forward and fashion relevant as it could be, and to sell a lot of shoes. People don't buy impact, they buy shoes. The impact is what differentiates you from other footwear companies, and it also makes the consumer feel good about the purchase. But you can't wear impact. So we flipped the model of the company so that we are in business to improve lives. That's our mission. And our business model is footwear. So we came in, we overhauled the product portfolio, we elevated the iconic silhouette. We celebrated it last year as this is what we're known for, the alpargata slip-on. And then a couple of months later, we started to launch new modern versions, starting in June with the Mallow, which is a women's modern version, modern light construction, super comfortable. A men's version called the Rover. And then through the pipeline of this year into next year, into 2022 and 2023, we're going to continue celebrating our product, the alpargata. We're a footwear company. That's what Tom's does. That's the business that we're in, to improve the lives that we set out to do with our impact. So a big, quite a significant shift, and hopefully something that's helpful to some of the people who are listening or watching today, is to think about what it is that makes you iconic. Like what product, what category, what are you known for, and how can you celebrate that and be proud of it?
Ian, you're kind of unique because you're the CMO, you're also the Chief Digital Officer, which means that not only do you set a lot of strategy and strategic direction, you also, and do the branding and a variety of other things, you also participate in some of the tactics digitally on modern platforms, mobile, desktop, all that stuff, in making that come alive. What tactics and tools do you use in marketing this business that you're talking about?
Yeah. Look, I came into this role as the CMO, and our CEO, Magnus, who I've worked with for 15 years across multiple companies, he's a product guru and he's a product guy, and I'm a marketing guy. When I came into the role, we saw a huge opportunity to do something that hadn't been done before or isn't done enough. And I honestly think it's something that companies should be thinking more about, which is giving the CMO full accountability of e-com, given its importance as a channel, as a business channel. CMOs typically look after the brand and the marketing and the asset creation and the marketing plans and spend, but don't own particularly the e-com and the direct-to-consumer channels. So that becomes another team. And often as a CMO, you're really focused on brand value and brand health and brand longevity. So you're thinking out a long way. The e-com team, in contrast, is thinking about yesterday's sales, today's sales, and tomorrow's sales. So it's very, very here and now and immediate. And there can often be rifts between the two agendas. One team is trying to sell as much as they can today, regardless. And the other team is trying to build a long-term brand. So having the opportunity to be over both teams means that I can integrate short and long-term goals and try and get as synergistic as we can, so that everything we put into the daily pipe for e-com is building brand value for the long term, which is what the marketing team is all about. So that's been particularly important. I think that a lot of e-com decisions, particularly in performance marketing and lower funnel, are done just to sell stuff. And they're certainly not done to build an image of being a purpose-led company. They're being done to throw assets into Facebook so that people click on it and buy it. So I'm trying to get a better balance between those two agendas and get to the halfway point and build a brand while selling as much as we can in the short term. As I said, we're in business to improve lives. So that's what the role is. It's been really fun to build really strong bridges between brand marketing and e-com. And then the team that sits in the middle of those two is the performance marketing team, which in any company is the team that gets thrown between the two agendas because they're marketing. So doing a lot of work with that team and the performance agencies so that we're all on the same page in terms of short and long-term goals. And gosh, I mean, if there's nobody listening right now who would not agree that this last year has been the most challenging as it comes to digital marketing. Just from navigating the change of consumer behavior as everybody went inside with the pandemic, and obviously everybody rushed towards re-changing their spend patterns from travel and restaurants to buying goods and doing it online and doing it on websites. So principally by tuning all of our energies and attentions into digital marketing. And separately, we also overhauled and built a world-class website in 4 months that was slated to be built over 12 to 18 months starting next year, or this year, sorry, 21. So we did it in 2020. We talked to our agency who gave us that sort of 12 to 18 month timeline. And we said, well, can you do it in 3? They said, if we meet every day instead of every week, and every day we make decisions for the next day. And we said, let's do it. So we built an incredibly fast turnaround website to be ready for what we thought was a short-lived, situation with the pandemic. It turned out to be a lot longer than we expected. So we got our website and mobile experience to a great place. We changed our focus for all the teams towards digital and e-commerce. So that was navigating the beginnings of the pandemic and consumer behavior. And then we got into the craziness of supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
Early on for us, earlier this year in 2021, we were losing whole containers off ships that were overloaded, overstacked. At one point, 5 ships had containers that had overboard containers, and we were on 3 of them. So we had to navigate that. There were factory fires from factories being overloaded as well. There was all the impact of COVID in areas with factories in southern China and Vietnam. So we moved through all of that at the beginning of this year. Then we were faced with the Apple privacy, Facebook opt-out situation, which we fundamentally agree that if you're going to be tracked, you need to know about it, and if you don't want to be tracked, you need to be able to opt out. But that caused a big change in how all of us could target the consumer, particularly with AI and the machine, and looking for lookalike targets. So we had to pivot really quickly to keep momentum in that space. Separately with digital marketing, just because everybody was spending on digital to get to e-commerce, the cost of per acquisition, CPMs, were going through the roof, 50% up in terms of cost to acquire a consumer. So we had that cost. So we were fortunate we had enough e-com momentum to keep us going through. And now we're just picking up the pieces and getting ready for next year.
I mean, John, when he just puts it all into that perspective, and you just think, yes, this is what the year was. But when you hear it all in one piece, you say, wow, it is amazing that CMOs and companies are where they are. It was the most challenging.
No, it's a wonder my hair hasn't gone gray. Seriously.
Hey, you have hair.
The wonder yours didn't fall out. But I'll tell you what, a couple of things have come through it all, because the other thing that's happening that we're all reading about it's all front page news, from climate change to supply chain to pandemic to Apple privacy and the Great Resignation. We're also managing and navigating through a hugely mobile workforce right now. So, all of those things makes you really learn to be a precise leader and make clear, concise, swift decisions. There was no time this year to be thinking more than in the moment, to lean into all your experience with confidence and say, this isn't working, we have to do this. And if we don't, we won't have a business. So we have to move this way quickly. I think we're all going to come out of all of what we've learned in the last 18 months, I think, as more confident leaders, if we come out of it successfully. If we don't come out of it successfully, we'll come out of it as leaders who'll have learned a lot of lessons in how to do things differently the next time around. Because in 30 years of marketing, I've never had a year with so many macro factors. And for us at Tom's, just to layer in our brand journey, a year and a half ago, we did this whole reset of our impact model, which was a big deal to shift from 1/3 of profits. We did a creative overhaul to change the whole look and feel. We rebranded with our logo and trademarks. We reset all of our photography to be more youthful. We also reset our whole creative direction to be more diverse and speak to a larger variety of different communities. So internally, we set our whole brand up to do a complete overhaul and reset and relaunch, which we did in April this year, which in any other year is a huge amount of work. And in any other year, that's a big job, particularly because we're trying to reset our brand from being like an aging consumer who came to us 15 years ago when she was in her 20s and now she's in her 40s. And we want to be relevant to her, but with a youthful outlook for the brand. We want to be a brand that's positioned as a 20-something brand. So, all of that was in play. That's all the internal hard work that we did. And then we had to grapple with all the macros. So you're then going out into the marketplace with this new fresh brand and a new relevant impact model and all these brand new shoes that are modern and comfortable and lightweight. And then you're faced with supply chain and the pandemic and no retail stores and wholesale partners disappearing and or CPMs going up and people opting out of Facebook and everything like that. Again, if this hasn't made us all tougher leaders, then I don't know what will.
Peggy, you just said it. I have to say it again. I mean, sometimes we don't recognize all the stuff we've gone through. Sometimes we don't remember. We're so focused on what's coming, what's forward, what's ahead, what's the next challenge. We don't take 30 seconds to look at the past and say, wow, 2020 and 2021 changed our perceptions of work, of business, of life, changed our perceptions of what's possible. You built a 1.5-year website in 4 months, right? You rebranded, you changed your purpose somewhat, how it's expressed. You're coming out with multiple new lines, and you're doing that with, as you said, during the Great Resignation. You're in Santa Barbara. Your workforce is wherever your workforce happens to be. And somehow you're managing all this. Peggy, some of us this past 2 years, we've done amazing things.
Yeah, truly. I think this has been an absolutely pivotal year for doing so many things differently and learning on the fly and making decisions on the fly, for sure.
I'm going to bring us back to something that's a little bit less monumental. Bring us back to marketing. Some things that you did differently, and there are a ton of them, but one that was very interesting was a very different approach to influencer marketing. Everyone is going in one direction. They're looking for the popularity or the celebrity. You have a different approach. I guess the question is why you're doing this and where you're doing it as well, because you also, as you mentioned yourself, you have your existing audience maybe would have liked a different influencer approach, but you found the path less traveled.
We put hard and heavy expectations on ourselves with the marketing of our impact. We recognize that we're looked upon as a brand that's famous for leading with social impact, and we were very thankful for that. We understand that a lot of other brands follow our lead when it comes to how do you do impact. We get asked all the time to not just speak on podcasts, but go to roundtables with companies and speak to the media and talk about all of those sorts of things. So underneath wanting to reinvent with the 1/3 of profits for grassroots good that supports issues such as mental health and access to opportunity for marginalized communities. So that's our giving intent, which is this new way of doing it that we believe is the right way for the world we live in today and in the future. So then the marketing team has to then market with that in mind. That's not just our giving model, that's our company's mantra internally and externally. So how do you then market with purpose at its center? Given that we've shifted all those models. So my team and I went through all the things you do in marketing and re-challenged, how would you do celebrity? How would you do influencer? How would you do media partnerships? And how would you do collaborations if impact was the main reason for doing it? So impact meaning we want to make an impact in the world. We want to line up with the issues such as mental health that are important to us. So how would you collaborate with mental health in the center? How would you use influencers to sell product, but with mental health or access to opportunity or a marginalized community at the center? So it created a lot more work because instead of just buying a suite of influencers from an agency who tout your product, which is not the Tom's way, that didn't feel like the right way to do that. That might be fine for another company, but if people are looking to us as a leader in purpose, then just buying influencers is not very purposeful. So we've had to hand select influencers who have recognized authority and awareness in the spaces that are important to us. And part of that is knowing who we're not going to line up with. We've made a choice around mental health and access to opportunity, particularly in certain marginalized communities. So that means we're not going to line up with climate change influencers, for example, or people doing human rights and trafficking or addiction, for example. So we know our lane and we're sticking to our lane. That's a really important part of a strategy, is crafting a strategy, then sticking to it, refining the tactics, but sticking to the strategy. So handpicking influencers who are already in the space is a very, very manual process. And we've worked with nearly 100 influencers this year, and every single one of them are bulletproof as it relates to someone looking at that person and saying, are they from the LGBTQ community? Yes. Are they advocates for mental health or access to opportunity? Yes. And we've lined up with them with shared values and common purpose. And they're also presenting our products. So that's some heavy lift on the influencer side. As I said, we had to do it manually versus just buying groups of people. We're halfway through the process of doing that at a higher level with celebrity, and that's even harder because you're also dealing with people who are very, very visible publicly, and we want to make sure that visibility is as much recognized for their social impact as it is for their celebrity. So we're in that process. And then finally, we did it with collaborations, which I'm sure Peggy will get to in a minute. But the collaboration piece was both the hardest because it's never been done before, but the most rewarding because we did something that hasn't been done before, which is collaborate with other products through the lens of impact.
We have the chief digital officer talking about doing stuff in a very manual way, not scalable, has to be done one by one by one to get it done right and purposefully. Let's also talk about customer retention and how you folks that. What drives customer retention for you, and how's that differ across different segments of your customers?
For sure. We are currently operating 2 funnels. We have a very strong, loyal base of women who've been around with us for the long haul, for up to 15, 16 years. She loves to buy her core alpargatas, slip-ons. She likes to buy the seasonals and the special prints, and increasingly some of our collaborations. And we can depend on her in the millions and millions and millions of consumers who are extremely loyal to us. We have a great relationship. We know where they are. We know who they are. We know what they like. And it becomes very predictable for us when we launch seasonal prints and colors and patterns that she'll be there for us. So we continue through loyalty program and email to engage and speak to her. It's a great thing, but as she's gotten older, it's also not something you want to hang your only hat on, because she came to our brand in her early 20s and she's now 15 years later, not in her early 20s. So that's important, and that's a big part of our retention. But one of the things we've done more recently is to start acquiring a new younger consumer. So we've got that lower funnel retention for that lady, and we're very thankful for her. We're now building an upper funnel for a new younger Gen Z, younger millennial consumer who we're introducing our brand to. She may not even know who Tom's is, or she may know us obliquely as something that her older sister, auntie, mother has worn before. She may or may not know One for One. She certainly will increasingly know 1/3 of profits for Grassroots Good. And we hope that she knows us, not just for that 1/3 of profits giving model, but for the new shoes we're making. We don't need to give her a history lessons and say we are famous for the classic alpargata slip-on. What we need to do is say, we've made a modern shoe called the Mallow. If you're interested, it's inspired by our famous classic slip-on alpargata, but we're speaking to her as if she doesn't know who we are. So we're building a relationship with her, with our acquisition strategies, starting at the absolute top of the funnel with PR and influencers and media partnerships and collaborations. And we've only really just begun that journey. We're less than 6 months in engaging her. So we're still working at the highest level of bringing her into the brand and making her aware of who we are and what we do and what we make and what we sell. And then we'll move her through over time. And that all sounds great on paper. It's harder to explain to our owners that we have this loyal lady, but she's getting older. We now have a new target, and she's younger. And if we get the targeting right and be fashion forward and socially responsible, some of that older millennial woman will like that as well. I believe in fashion, that if you want to be inspiring to all demographics, all groups, and you do that by being youthful. But we're going after this younger consumer, but she's not going to come running to us overnight. You can't just do one collab, 3 influencers and a couple of ads on Instagram and suddenly have them all running through your door. They're not waiting for us to do that. So it's a journey with acquisition, and we've only just begun that. So we've got the marathon in acquisition. We have the urgency of retention given all the volatility of the marketplace. So we are running 2 funnels, and eventually at some point next year, they might start to blend together as that new consumer starts to move down through into retention, and that becomes relevant. And then we believe that we're acquiring anybody who's socially responsible regardless, and the 2 funnels might come together, which would be interesting. But at this point, we have a lower and an upper, which is unique. I haven't seen that before either.
You mentioned it yourself. You can't really sort of say, give a history lesson or educate, but you do have to combine these funnels. You ultimately want one. And it's also about the way you speak to the consumer. The customer, it's a level of advertising and marketing, but it's also very important empathy. So how do you speak to these 2 consumers, these 2 consumer groups? Because you obviously also don't want to be off-putting to your loyal audience. And you want to do it in a way that attracts the new one, as you said. So how do you do that at a more practical level? What does that look like?
Yeah. I think first of all, as you change a brand, as fundamentally as we have everything from the choices of colors and the talent and how we communicate fashion style in simple ways, like do you wear socks with a slip-on or not? That's a big generation divide between younger who wears socks with slip-ons and older ones who don't. So you will lose people when you do a brand reset to the magnitude of 15 years of resetting from aiming at a 40 plus to a 20 plus. So number one, we have to be prepared to lose some as we gain. That's okay. You can't have everything. You can't keep all the loyals and gain all the new ones. That sounds greedy to me. So number one, we may lose some to gain some, but at the same time, we're looking for the middle ground with fashionability and social impact that should be appealing to anybody in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. Again, there'll be some that will drop off because we may not be as relevant as they thought we were before, and that's okay. But our goal is to be a youthful brand that is fashion forward and is deep in a relevant social impact space. And that should cut across demographics, that should cut across generations. But the sweet spot or the sharp point is that older Gen Z, younger millennial, which I've learned across multiple brands, starting at MTV and at Converse and at UGG. In fashion, that is a golden age, the early 20s. People younger look up to someone in their early 20s and say, I wish or can't wait to be them. And then any one of us who are older than the young 20s wish we were in our young 20s again. So it's a good sweet spot in fashion. If we can get that mix right, if we can get that nuance right. Interestingly, we're not trying to be the sharpest fashion leader in the fashion space. That's for the catwalk brands and other people. We just want to be fashion relevant and fashion forward, which gives us probably a slightly wider net to catch. We're not trying to break fashion trends. We're just trying to make people look good and feel good about themselves.
You've talked about reaching out to the customer, reaching this new consumer as well as existing. You've done some major partnerships, and you mentioned that actually. How's that changing with your new focus, and what did you do with Wildfang?
Yeah, thanks. We're so excited about that. I've been fortunate to have been with Magnus, our CEO, in the product collaboration space for the longest time, all the way through Converse and my time at UGG. And traditionally, particularly in footwear, it's 2 brands that come together to make what I call the holy shit impact, right? To do things that haven't been seen before, done before. Wow, it's 1 + 1 = 3. I never saw that coming. To get the brand heat and hype and excitement and energy. And a lot of those collaborations are not volume drivers. They're just simply to get attention, particularly in the 1 + 1 = 3. So it's very product focused, and they're either 2 brands that are obviously good matches, or sometimes they're 2 brands that aren't good matches who come together and make something incredibly unexpected. So for us to keep doing that wouldn't be very pioneering. We'd just be doing product collaborations with other people to make versions of our product. So Koetsier, my PR and brand com lead, and I said, well, what's the Tom's way? How would Tom's approach a collaboration? Still with product, because we want to make stuff and sell stuff, but how would Tom's, through the lens of purpose and pioneering, do collaborations differently? So we set about looking for other brands in the fashion and footwear space with shared purpose, values, and visions that we had. Starting with a fantastic, beautiful brand from Portland called Wildfang. And we came to them and said, look, we share some common goals and some common values around empowering and elevating certain communities. Let's come together and make an impact. Let's come together and sell stuff and give to those communities. So our relationship is about coming together so that 1 + 1 = 3 in a giving sense. Let's give more, but because we've come together, than we would if we were doing it on our own. Let's celebrate that with great storytelling and content that elevates awareness for these communities. And finally, let's make products together that celebrates the partnership. So we flip the whole collaboration approach on its head. So instead of saying, look at the products we've made, and by the way, we're giving because of it, or by the way, look at this film that celebrates the products, it's let's come together to support communities. Let's make content that celebrates and boosts those communities, and the product is simply the thing that proves we did it. So we did the first one. We launched it a couple of weeks ago with Wildfang. It was a head to toe. They're famous, if you don't know, for their head to toe coverall for women. We're famous brand for shoes. So we did a head to toe collection with their coverall and some shoes and some socks. And we're pretty much sold out across both websites. And it was all about what we were doing to give back. So we found a nonprofit that we both believed in that was the focus of our give. We elevated that nonprofit. They're called Project Q. We made content about them and why they were important and why we were coming together to support them. And here's the product that recognizes this partnership. So we have a whole roadmap over the next 2 years of similar sorts of collaborations that with impact at its core, giving at its core, with product that celebrates the reason two brands have come together, particularly in areas like mental health and access to opportunity. So we hope that gets people's attention. We hope that in this very cluttered world of product collaborations, that more brands see the opportunity to collaborate with purpose in mind and product as a reason. So we'll see, but we're excited.
Ian, Peggy and I have talked to a lot of people, very, very impressive people. Still, there's a few ones that we do here and there that stand out head and shoulders, and this is going to be one of them for me. And I'm seeing Peggy kind of nod here, so I'm thinking that's true for her as well. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for being open about some of the challenges and difficulties we've gone through and actually celebrating them as well, celebrating our passage through them. Really do appreciate your time.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Peggy. That's awesome. I had a great time.
It's definitely a +1, Ian, particularly when you just put it on the line. People do not buy impact, they buy product. And then it's the strategy of combining them so beautifully as you have. And I can only say you are rewriting a new playbook, which is maybe what exactly we need to hear, because we've heard the drama of this last 2 years that's still got me thinking, oh my goodness, we're still here. No, absolutely. Such a pleasure to have you on the show and have you share that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Peggy. Thanks, John. Thanks so much. And thanks everyone for listening. Hopefully there's something there you can take away and do more good in the world.